Welcome to the Divorce View Talk Show. This show is all about supporting you, whether you're just thinking about a divorce, whether you're in the middle of a divorce, or you're moving your life forward after divorce. In fact, we even have you covered if you want to get back into the dating game. Hello, it's Joanie Winberg, certified human behavior consultant, divorce mentor, and CEO of the National Association of Divorce for Women and Children, along with my fabulous co-hosts, Rosalind Sedacca. Hi, Roz.
Hi. Hi, Joanie. I'm Roselind Sedacca. I'm a divorce and parenting coach, founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network for Parents, author of How Do I Tell the Kids About the Divorce. And I'm excited to have you all with us today. And we have a wonderful guest who's going to share a lot of insights that many of you don't like to be thinking about, but it's a reality that we all have to consider. So, Joan, why don't you tell us more about our guest?
Okay, absolutely. Well, we actually had, I love that name, Joan. We actually had Joan Rogliano several weeks ago, and we brought her back. She's actually a divorce real estate specialist. She's filling us in a lot about buying a house, selling it, and so forth. And so, Joan, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you back.
Thank you. It's absolutely my pleasure. I just applaud each of you for the work that you're doing. It's so very important, and the contributions you're making. Thank you.
Thank you. You and I have been talking about the topic, and Roz has been mentioning about different topics, and of course the house is a big deal. And so today we're going to talk about, do the dollars make sense, divorce in your house? So Joan, kind of fill us in where you're coming from with that, and what some of the tips that you're going to be sharing with us today.
Well, you're very right. This is an extremely important topic when anyone is considering divorce. Outside of the children, it is the biggest, largest emotional decisions that people have to make, because there's always a lot of emotion surrounding the marital home. So the choices are three: whether or not somebody's going to keep the house. You can keep it forever, so to speak. Somebody buys somebody else out, and we can talk about pros and cons of that. You can just sell the house outright, or you can have a final agreement written so that someone is staying in the house for a certain period of time, say till the kids graduate from school, and then the agreement states that the home is going to be sold. So it's just important that everybody, I say, take a deep breath before any decisions are made about the marital home, because sometimes people rush headlong and say, oh, I just want to do this, I just want to do that, and they really haven't looked at the ramifications of their choice.
Mm-hmm. Joan, can I ask you, before you move forward, a question that I think is important for many of our listeners and viewers, and that is it better to find a specialist who understands the dynamics of divorce, such as yourself, versus any realtor? Can any realtor help a divorcing couple make the best decision for themselves, taking into account all the financial ramifications and the subtleties that you know so well when a family is involved?
I think that's an excellent question, and it's one that I would answer by saying I think a real estate divorce specialist is truly the best route to go. We have special training. We have been through a lot of training as to understanding what families are going through. And actually, if you can find someone, a realtor who's been through a divorce, as I myself have been, they tend to really be drawn to helping the family work through this very difficult transition. Because again, I've talked to a lot of realtors that will refer business to me because they say, oh, I don't want to go anywhere near this. Yeah. Because there's so much extra work involved, because frequently, as a realtor, you're doing twice the work. You're talking to him, and then you're talking to her, and you're emailing him, and you're emailing her, because they're not communicating.
So, and you're more or less the mediator here.
Yes, you are, and you have to be very, very careful that you are communicating equally with each party, So no one gets their feelings hurt or feels as though you are in somebody's corner and not in my corner. So it's a very sensitive situation, and it needs to be handled, I would say, very gingerly, but coming from a place of knowledge, and also someone who has a little bit of a sense of humor can really help.
Good.
You know, you all know with the work that you do, sometimes humor appropriately used can help to diffuse a situation.
Yes.
Not all the time, not
Yes.
all the time, but appropriately, yeah. That's a
So how
question.
do you help make that big decision about the three choices? Talk to us more about that.
Well, I maintain the first step really is to get a team in place, because this is not an isolated real estate decision. It's a very emotional decision. Most people need a little shoring up, perhaps having a coach in place, having a loan originator in your corner. So he or she will help you understand if this is something even feasible, if you're thinking that you want to keep the house. I was telling Joanie before we went on the air that I talked to a woman last week who is dead set on keeping her home. And the more we talked, the more she shared with me that, in fact, she makes $22,000 a year, and she has a $3,000 a month mortgage payment. Well, you can do the math. You just look at the numbers, and you can say gently, I'm really not sure that this is going to work out. So that financial piece is vital, because that can make the decision right there. If you don't have the numbers, the house has to be sold. And then having a financial planner in place too, because most people, I'm sure that you work with, understand that it's time to look at some new financial goals for post-divorce.
So the first choice would be, you're saying that one of the choices that you could actually buy, one person can buy the other out, which it sounds like this woman was hoping to do.
Yes, absolutely. She was hoping to do that, or to come up with an arrangement where someone, she could stay in the house and, for example, say she isn't on the mortgage, but she's entitled. And so it is agreed in the final agreement that she's going to stay in the house for a certain period of time. And in certain instances, he could be paying the mortgage, or it could be vice versa. He could be paying and she's paying the mortgage. And the final agreement could be written that way. The caveat here, though, is if whoever is staying in the home is not on the mortgage, they need to have access to find out whether or not that mortgage is up to date. Because with the privacy laws, if you're not on a mortgage, you really can't contact the lender, the mortgage holder, and say, well, I'm just checking to be sure everything is paid in full, because they won't tell you that information. This I know from experience, because I've had people, women usually call me and say, well, I have the agreement, he's supposed to pay the mortgage. I just got a call from the mortgage holder. They're foreclosing on our home because he, in fact, didn't make the mortgage payment. So, yes, he's in contempt of court, but as she said, I'm going to be out on the street with my kids because they're foreclosing on the house.
Wow.
So there are some specific ways to look at all of this, again, before a final decision is made.
And how do you prevent that kind of thing from happening?
Well, I'm not an attorney, but I do know that goes into the final agreement. And you can write the final agreement and just say, well, Joan's not on the mortgage and she's going to stay in the house, but her soon-to-be ex-spouse is giving permission for her to contact whoever's holding the mortgage to be sure things are current. And that way there are no surprises. Or one person can make a payment to the person staying in the home, and that person staying in the home could then make the mortgage payment. There are a few different ways to work this, but this is all something that needs to be entered into the final agreement.
So I bet flexibility is a really key quality that you try to instill in clients. I know we do with our coaching clients. The more flexible you are, the better the outcome because there's some give and take. I imagine that's the case in the work you're doing too.
Yes, that's definitely true in the negotiation stage. But when you get down to what this is ultimately going to look like, in my opinion, there's certain things where there isn't flexibility. It has to be spelled out very clearly who is responsible for what regarding the marital home if someone is going to keep the marital home. And there is an agreement as to how the payments are going to be made. If the marital home is sold, of course, it's black and white, or if one party is buying the other party out. But if they're both still involved and still connected around this home, the lines have to be very clear.
That's great information, because maybe a person wouldn't think that they can't call and get information about the mortgage. So it's really important to make sure that you have permission to call and get the answers that you may need.
Yes, and the other piece of that, Joanie, is people are, the few phone calls that I've had regarding this, people are just baffled, and they'll say, well, how could he or she do this to me and my children? We're going to be out on the street. And you can't fathom that someone would do that, but unfortunately they do that. And are they in contempt? Yes, most likely they are if they are violating what the final agreement is. And that does happen. People don't like to think that way, but unfortunately that's the reality, which I'm sure you both see in your practices.
Plus, it gets into a real tricky situation if people are fighting and can't get along. That to me is leverage. You just don't pay the mortgage. That's pretty heavy.
You're exactly right. Unfortunately, sometimes there is a lot of I'm going to get you back or revenge, whatever that comes into play, and this is one vehicle they can use to play that out. So make sure your agreement is really tight, and work with your loan originator, work with your legal advisor, work with your realtor, work with your financial planner to make sure you're protected.
Do you have any advice for those who have to sell the marital home? Both parties need to either purchase a smaller home or a rental property, and what time frame is involved, and how do we keep both sides moving ahead cooperatively when something like that is taking place?
Well, cooperation,
especially with children involved.
Yeah, and this wears many different faces, and cooperation is a key word here because sometimes there is a lack of cooperation. Again, someone doesn't want to sell the home, and so there is so-called dragging their feet. They won't let people in to see it. The house is a mess when people come in, and so on and so forth. So this, again, is where your realtor can come into play and in a sense, negotiate this and try and make everybody understand that this really is for the best to get this process moving forward, particularly in a market like our market here in Denver, where properties are going on the market and they're going under contract with multiple offers in 24 to 48 hours. So it's moving very, very quickly, and therefore you want the house to be optimum so that people can get top dollar. Because this can come back to bite somebody too. If someone is being obstinate and standing in the way, the other party can come back. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I've heard of this happening after the person who's dragging their feet and say, well, you didn't show the house was a mess, we could have gotten more money if you had done your part, therefore I'm coming after you because you held up the sale. That does happen. Yeah, it's dicey. Because this is the largest financial investment that most people have. So it's really key that they get top dollar if in fact the house is going to be sold.
So it sounds like you are basically being a therapist, so to speak,
Yes.
parties to keep them from sabotaging one another and to keep them on the right track so that they can move ahead and get the results that they want without kicking each other and getting into battles along the way. Is that right?
Yes, and I think you understand now, and I hope your audience does as well, why not every realtor really
Yeah.
wants to take on this project. Some of them will just say, you know, as I mentioned, no, this isn't for me. But it is incredibly rewarding when you can see that you can make a difference and you can guide each of the parties to do what's best for the family as a whole. It
Hmm.
really makes a big difference.
Mm, definitely.
And that's,
I don't know about you, Roz, but maybe you feel like a therapist sometimes as well.
well, I'm sure, a good part of the time. But that's the philosophy behind the divorce view. Everything we do is about that, what's in the best interest of the entire family. And it takes fairly mature people to understand that this isn't just about me. This is about us, especially because we have children. And they're going to be hurt when we make the wrong decisions, when we make selfish decisions. So or another piece of the puzzle, reminding them about that, and we so value that you get that and are doing that part of the work.
Well, thank you for that. And I think you said that very, very beautifully. If each of us doing our jobs, and both of you contribute in this arena as well, concentrating on the family, concentrating on moving people forward so they, and if their children involved, the children can get on with their lives. Because it is just such a volatile time, which also rolls into another suggestion I would make for people, and that is really stop and think for a moment. If you are in a position, should you sell the marital home, if you're in a position to purchase a new home, oftentimes I've counseled people not to buy, but to rent.
Hmm.
So that they can make this transition financially, they can settle the emotions down, and they'll just be making a much better, a more informed decision when the water's settled and is a little bit less choppy. Because in most markets, you cannot buy a home and then sell it a year or two later because now you've decided you want something different. Now
I
you're
think
involved into the divorce. I'm sorry?
No, I was going to say, and also what you're saying is such great advice too, because as we all mentioned before, the emotions are running so high, and you're making a quick decision, and then as everything settles, the dust settles, so to speak. At that point, you might say, you know, I really jumped into this too quickly, and I really don't like this area, or I shouldn't have bought this house. It's too big, too little, whatever. So, like you said, rent. You know, come up
Right.
for air, so to speak, come up for air,
Mm-hmm.
and then think about a house later on.
Yes, think of it as a transition, and it's temporary. You might decide you love to rent and you're never going to buy a new home. Or you might decide you don't want to rent after a year, 6 months, and you do want to buy, but you're just coming from a much better place. And this is also where it's really important to choose that right realtor that will say to you, I mean, I've talked myself out of sales. Because you know that this is not the right choice for this man or this woman at this moment in time.
Hmm.
So find a realtor that's really going to be about you, not about them and the transaction. And there are realtors out there that will guide you through this.
Mm.
Are there ways of finding specialists like you? Because not everyone lives in Denver. So how do we access people who have the heart and the soul and the expertise that you're providing?
Well, they can contact me because I am making connections throughout the country now, setting up an organization, hopefully in all 50 states, of professionals who are like-minded and really want to support these families. So I believe my website is there. Please contact me via email, and I'll be happy to help them in any way that I can.
So through your website, they should be able to email you.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
There's a contact me.
Okay.
I would be happy to help.
Any other thoughts from either one of you as far as housing and divorce and so forth?
I wanted to mention one other thing. Is that okay, Roz, or did you have something?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, Joanie and I were talking again before we went on air, and I wanted to be sure to mention that one of the choices, of course, is for someone to remain in the home or to buy the other person out. And if that is the instance, if that's the choice, it's really, really important to do an inspection of the property, because you want to know what you are now taking on to be solely responsible for. This is something most people don't think about, because they say, oh, I've lived here for 3 years or 5 years or 20 years and everything seems to be working. Well, that might very well be the case right now, but the hot water heater could be on the verge of going. Your furnace could have a major issue. So do spend the money to have a full inspection done on the property before you buy the other person out. Can save you money in the long run. You want to know what you're buying, just as you would if you were buying a new home.
So in that case, if you're in a divorce decree or whatever your arrangement is, if you need more funding or more money for you who is keeping the house, that the water heater or the furnace is, next year could possibly go, then you would ask for more money for the situation.
That's a great point, yes, and that could be negotiated in a variety of ways, lowering the price that you're paying for the home, or somebody taking fewer assets in trade, so to speak. But yes, that can then enter into the negotiations. That's a really good point, Joan.
Okay.
Be sure and do that.
Definitely. So, Roz, any other questions or thoughts from you as well?
Well, I'd love if you could speak a little bit more about the children's side of things. Have you had any experiences where parents with children created situations that were a little more challenging for you, or any tips you have about working with families with children, especially since school is such an important criteria after divorce?
I think frequently that the children are the driving force behind this decision, particularly to keep the house, because they don't, one party or the other frequently does not want the children uprooted from their community, as you're saying, from the neighborhood, from the school, and so on and so forth. So frequently that is definitely the driving force. And so when that is the case, everyone needs to sit down and look at the numbers and be very empathetic and say, well, I understand how important this is to you because of your children, but please realize that the numbers have you in a situation where you could be putting yourself financially on the line. Are you sure that's something you want to do? And approach that in a very empathetic manner and perhaps present some other options for them. There could be some good rental units. They could downsize and still stay within the same school district or within a neighborhood that's got proximity to where they currently are. But oftentimes it is the kids.
Oh, of course, definitely, definitely. Well, Joan, so much information, valuable information. I hope our listeners have taken some great notes. And they also, once again, have your website that they can contact you or email you, so if they're looking for someone in their area. So, Joan, once again, just even though it's on the front of the screen, but let them know your website again.
My website is roglianorealestategroup.com, and it's ROGLIANO, realestategroup.com. So please, if there's any way I can help, let me know.
And are there any real estate resources that you might suggest to our viewers other places that they could turn to get some support or insights?
Well, I have a list of those as well, so I'm happy to provide those as well. I'm just afraid it might be difficult for me to start spelling
Oh,
things out.
absolutely. So your website, once again, would be the place to go.
Correct, or they can call me.
Okay.
Beautiful.
303-667-5485.
Well, Joan, thanks so much for being on the show. Roz, any last thoughts or words of wisdom here?
Well, I was just going to ask Joan if she could leave us with some last thoughts about what the most important things for our viewers to remember.
That's easy. Just take a deep breath and don't make any decisions right away. Gather your team around you. Things will settle down and it will get better.
Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you so much. This was very valuable for everyone, and we appreciate your time.
Absolutely my pleasure, ladies. I can't believe the time went so fast. So thank you. It was an honor.
Thanks again, Joan, for being on the show. And also for our listeners to listen to the archive and the show and all our other shows, you can go to divorceview.com. Also, Roz and I have, because we're known as the Divorce Mentor Team, we're here to support you. And also, when you go to divorceview.com, you will see other types of programs and tools and tips that we're here to help you no matter what stage you are going through during your divorce or after divorce. So, Roz, always a pleasure.
Look forward to seeing everyone again, and we're on live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So catch us there or catch us on the archives.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.